Unji Zuma lost everything. His family, his home, his childhood, all taken in a single cruel moment. He stood at the edge of devastation. He could have become pure rage, or he could have simply vanished. Instead, he took that wound and shaped it into a steady purpose. Viktor Frankl survived the worst of it and wrote Man's Search for Meaning to explain a brutal truth. Suffering can break you, or it can make you deliberate. Tonight, you'll see how Unji turned his pain into a quiet, unstoppable force. You'll watch a broken life become a guide for anyone who feels ruined. Pay attention to the small choices, the breath before a reply, the hand offered instead of a strike. These tiny turns decide whether suffering swallows you or steals you. Stay for just a minute. If you do, you'll learn the single shift that turns grief into direction, and why meaning matters more than victory. Listen closely. One deliberate breath, one steady choice can reroute your grief into purpose and begin a new story. We enter Unji Zuma's silence. Not the silence of peace, but the quiet after a storm, when every breath feels like a betrayal because the ones you loved no longer breathe beside you. He carried this wound into every morning. But here's the unexpected turn. He didn't ask, "Why me?" He asked, "What now?" Viktor Frankl wrote that survivors weren't always the strongest, but the ones who found meaning in the smallest acts. Unji clung to that idea. He tested it daily. One moment, one choice, one pause before letting grief dictate his path. One choice. Imagine standing where he stood. The ruins still smoking, the voices gone. Most would shut down or lash out. Instead, Unji searched for meaning inside the pain. He whispered, "I will not let this wound speak for me." That single decision became the seed of something greater, because pain isn't the end, it's the beginning of a new direction, if you dare to look at it. Each morning, he chose a task, no matter how small: carrying water, sweeping ashes, repairing a broken wall. These weren't chores, they were anchors. Frankl's words echo here. Suffering stops being suffering when you find purpose in it. For Unji, purpose grew from building what had been shattered. But here's the brutal truth. Meaning isn't given, it's wrestled from the darkness, and every step forward risked collapse. The temptation of rage, the ease of surrender waited at every turn. Why didn't he give in? What force held him steady when bitterness promised relief? He remembered his mother's last words before the fire. Choose kindness, even when the world is cruel. Those words hit him harder than the loss itself. They became his compass. Every time his fists clenched, he heard them, and he chose not to strike. Notice the pattern. Unji didn't wait for the storm to pass. He made a map inside the storm. Each choice, each breath, was a deliberate act of rebellion against despair. But rebellion has a cost, and soon his quiet resistance drew attention. Because in a broken world, hope doesn't go unnoticed. Those who thrive on despair see hope as a threat. And soon, someone decided to crush the seed Unji had planted. What happened next would test whether his meaning could survive the weight of cruelty itself. By the time Unji's small acts had begun to ripple through the broken streets, the world around him had grown restless. People whispered his name. Some called him a fool, clinging to kindness in a place built on cruelty. Others saw him as proof that despair was not final. But when hope spreads, it awakens fear in those who profit from hopelessness. One night, a group confronted him. They accused him of weakness, of betraying the dead by refusing vengeance. He stood silent, steady.
"I will not let grief decide my hands," he said softly. That single reply shook them more than any strike could. Viktor Frankl wrote that even in a concentration camp, you could choose your attitude toward suffering. That was the last freedom no guard could steal. Unji lived this truth, but living it put a target on his back. Because when one person proves choice is possible, others no longer have excuses. The cruelty came quickly. His meager food was stolen, walls he repaired were smashed again. They wanted to break him, to prove that meaning was a lie. But every attack only sharpened his resolve. He began to notice something. The more they tried to crush him, the more others quietly stood beside him. This is where Frankl's words became prophecy. He said, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Unji's why was simple: to make suffering serve something greater. That why turned every blow into proof. And then came the moment no one expected. The same men who had mocked and tried to break him faced a loss of their own. One fell to the ground, trembling, completely shattered. Everyone waited for Unji to walk away. Instead, he bent down and offered his hand. The silence that followed was heavy, because kindness in that place was more shocking than violence. His hand became a question: will you stay in despair or rise with me? And it is here the story splits in two directions. Did his mercy create loyalty, or did it mark him as too dangerous to live? The answer would decide not only his fate, but the meaning of everything he stood for. What happened next would reveal whether mercy was his greatest strength or his deadliest mistake.
The choice hung in the air. Mercy had always been his risk, and now it was his ultimate test. The man he helped up trembled, looked away, and then, unexpectedly, lowered his head. Something shifted in that instant. What should have been weakness became a new kind of authority, because power built on fear shatters, but power built on meaning spreads. Others saw it. One act of compassion had done what endless rage could not. People began to step toward Unji, not away. His quiet strength had become a powerful force. But with every new follower came a new danger, as those who ruled through terror felt their grip loosening. Viktor Frankl's insight was clear. Life is never unbearable by circumstances alone, but by losing meaning and purpose. Unji proved this with his very life. Even in the ashes, he created direction. Yet here's the twist. His story was never about triumph over enemies. It was about triumph over himself. In moments when bitterness beckoned, he chose patience. When revenge would have been easier, he chose restraint. And in doing so, he revealed a hidden law. Meaning matters more than victory. Here's the most surprising part. Years later, the same man he spared that night became his fiercest protector. What was once a threat became unshakable loyalty. Mercy had not destroyed him, it had expanded him. This is why his life matters to us, because grief will visit you, suffering will corner you, and in that moment you face the same question. Will you let pain dictate you, or will you dictate pain? Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning so we would not forget this truth. Even in horror, we are free to choose how we respond. Unji lived that truth, and his life whispers across time. You are not broken forever. Your story can turn, right here, right now. One deliberate breath, one steady choice. That is where your purpose begins. Comment one word, purpose, and subscribe for more stories like this, only on MindVerse.